Welcome to this conversation. Today we're diving into a provocative notion that suggests Christianity's roots weren't written in the quiet scribbles of ancient texts, but rather on a stage.
So, are we really saying that what we know as the Gospel of Mark might actually have theatrical origins?
Exactly. It's like, um, imagine this. The earliest account of Jesus, traditionally seen as a straightforward biography written around 70 CE, may have originally been performed as, well, a tragic play.
Right.
Instead of the canonical gospel, we assume, it could have been a dramatic, ritualized response to the crushing aftermath of the Bar Kokhba revolt.
Wow, that's, quite a shift in perspective. So, this performance was, in essence, a Greek tragedy, not a history or a testimony directly penned by eyewitnesses?
Yes, indeed. The argument goes, when Judea was essentially erased after the revolt, with destruction of the temple and a ban on Jewish rituals, the freefall of a messianic hope led to a profound cultural crisis. In this vacuum, someone in Rome wrote a play, a Greek tragedy centered on a character named Jesus, who, performs miracles, endures betrayal, and meets a lonely, tragic end on a Roman
Yep.
cross. It's as if the performance was a cathartic response, a way for a shattered community to process grief.
Interesting. And this isn't just poetic musing, is it? There are scholars suggesting that the structure of the Gospel of Mark closely mirrors the elements of Greek drama?
Exactly. Scholars like Dennis R. MacDonald have pointed out how the narrative exhibits abrupt scene changes, stock characters, and even irony. Elements you'd expect from a theater piece rather than a straightforward historical
Mm-hmm.
account. It seems the structure itself, with its choral-like declarations and sudden shifts, hints at something more performative.
So, let me get this right. The play, originally intended to help communities grieve and re-envision their identity after the devastation of the revolt, is what we later came to know as the Gospel of Mark.
Precisely. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. Around 135 CE, a man named Marcion, wealthy, persuasive, and already preaching that the Jewish God was, merely a lesser being, sees this play performed. He gets hold of the script.
Wait, so Marcion literally takes the script of a theatrical performance and repurposes it?
Yep, he does. He cuts it apart, stripping away all the Jewish references. No Torah, no prophetic continuity. He virtually rebrands the story, recasting Jesus as a divine entity from a higher, almost alien God, meant to liberate humanity from the material world.
Right.
He names it the Evangelion, the Gospel of the Lord, and even supports it with 10 letters attributed to Paul, which, according to scholars like Nina E. Livesey and Marcus Vincent, might have been rewritten or heavily influenced by Marcion himself.
That's a pretty radical reinterpretation. I mean, isn't it a bit of a stretch to claim that the first version of Jesus' life was just a stage performance meant for, theatrical coping?
It does sound, controversial, and I understand why it raises eyebrows. But think about it. The style of the narrative, with its abrupt scene cuts and almost choreographed moments of betrayal and loss, fits remarkably well with the conventions of Greek tragedy. It wasn't crafted to serve as a simple eyewitness account. It was designed to evoke emotion and communal catharsis.
Mm-hmm. So then, Marcion's version became the first sort of canon of Christianity, even though it was essentially a stripped-down, reassembled theatrical script?
Exactly. And then the picture gets even more layered. Around 180 CE, a church father named Irenaeus steps onto the stage. Furious at Marcion's heretical version, Irenaeus redoubles the narrative, or should I say, rewrites it entirely. He restores the Jewish material that Marcion removed, infusing the story with elements like a virgin birth, a resurrection, and an ascension.
Right.
This rebranding isn't just about adjusting theology. It's a deliberate act to claim authenticity and counter Marcion's reinterpretation.
That's such a dynamic back and forth. So Irenaeus' version eventually became what we now recognize as Orthodox Christianity, complete with its 4 canonical Gospels?
Spot on. Irenaeus declared that there should be exactly 4 Gospels. He further rewrote the Pauline letters in the context of the Book of Acts, positioning Paul as a defender of Jewish continuity and redirecting the narrative to align with a more established Jewish prophecy. It's almost like we're looking at a counter-counter remix where each faction battled for the true version of the story through intense editorial skirmishes.
Yep. I have to say, though, while the idea that a stage performance could evolve into something we revere as scripture is fascinating, doesn't it challenge the long-standing belief in direct eyewitness testimony? It almost feels like some of the raw historical elements might have been lost or transformed into art.
True, it's definitely challenging our preconceptions. Rather than being universally accepted first-hand accounts, the texts, over time, became remolded and reinterpreted narratives. They were adapted to fit the evolving theological and cultural needs as communities struggled with loss, identity, and power shifts in the wake of political and military upheavals.
It's like each major revision or reinterpretation wasn't simply an act of rewriting history, but also an attempt at healing and reasserting communal identity.
Exactly. The original tragic play, born out of the devastation following the Bar Kokhba revolt, was a creative way to process collective grief. And then Marcion's adaptation, by removing the Jewish elements, essentially sought to craft a new, more radical narrative. Irenaeus, in turn, reinstated those elements to re-anchor the story to a shared heritage with Jewish prophecy. It's a layered process of editing cultural and religious identity.
And to think, this wasn't a mere literary development, but a full-blown ideological turf war. One faction's version of a tragedy gets hijacked, repurposed, and then countered with yet another rewrite to assert what's authentic.
Absolutely. It really underscores the idea that what we read as sacred texts today are the product of continuous reinterpretation and revisionism driven by political and theological motives. Rather than being immutable, these stories were, well, living narratives shaped by the circumstances of their times.
So, basically, this theory invites us to look at Scripture not just as divine revelation, but also as art shaped by cultural exigencies and even theatrics. Isn't it astonishing how a stage performance could end up laying the groundwork for an entire religion?
Exactly. It compels us to re-examine our assumptions. It's like saying that, an artistic performance of grief and resilience might have been the seed from which a vast spiritual tradition sprouted. Even if some of us remain skeptical about completely discarding eyewitness tradition, it raises compelling questions about how narratives evolve.
Right. And while I respectfully challenge the leap from theatrical performance to wholesale doctrinal shift, I can't help but appreciate the elegance in how these texts mirror the dramatic, almost cinematic tensions of their time.
Absolutely, that's the crux of it. These texts are a mix of storytelling, trauma processing, and ideological battle. The idea isn't to undermine religious belief per se, but to reveal that our cherished narratives might have been sculpted by the forces of their time rather than being frozen in an objective moment of history.
And in that light, the evolution from the original theatrical performance of Mark, through Marcion's radical edits, to Irenaeus's restorative rewriting, is almost like watching a historical remix battle, each iteration leaving its imprint on what became Orthodox Christianity.
Precisely. It's a dynamic interplay of tradition versus innovation, of grief meeting the need for transformation. It's like each layer was added to heal, to empower, and to define the identity of communities facing existential crises.
Right. You know, it really makes me wonder how much of what we consider as established history might actually be the product of such creative and sometimes controversial reinterpretations over time.
It does, indeed. What we think of as foundational texts can be seen as mosaics of cultural memory, adapted, re-edited, and reinterpreted with every generation. And whether or not one wholly accepts the theatrical origin theory, it certainly opens up new perspectives on the interplay between art, history, and belief.
Yep, this really is like a fascinating blend of history, literature, and sociology. It's not just about religious texts. It's about how societies use art to cope with and even transform tragedy into something with lasting meaning.
Exactly. And when you think about it, it reminds us that narratives, especially those as influential as the Gospels, are shaped by human experiences with all their messiness and passion. They're as much about our past traumas as they are about our aspirations.
I have to say, this perspective, provocative as it is, really broadens the conversation about authenticity and the creation of sacred texts. It kind of makes you ask, what does history really mean when it's been so thoroughly reworked for cultural and political purposes?
Exactly that. It challenges the notion of immutable truth and instead proposes that so-called canonical texts are fluid, evolving recitals of long-past experiences, edited to suit the needs of each era.
Right. And while I might still lean toward a bit of caution regarding dismissing any eyewitness tradition outright, I absolutely appreciate the vitality of this analysis. How art, performance, and ideological battles may have reshaped a narrative so central to billions.
Absolutely. And it's this dynamic interplay that makes exploring these ideas so enriching. It shows that history is rarely, if ever, static. Rather, it's a living conversation, with debates that echo through the ages.
Thanks for this deep dive. It's been a real eye-opener to see how something as sacred as the Gospel of Mark might have come from a stage performance, undergoing so many transformations over time.
Always a pleasure to explore these multifaceted ideas. It leaves you pondering how our stories are not just written records, but living performances, continuously reinterpreted by each generation.
Yep, definitely. It's a reminder to keep questioning and re-examining the stages on which our history was performed. Thanks for this engaging discussion.
And thank you for challenging and clarifying these points. Until next time, keep that curious spirit alive.